Hello, welcome back to the Movie Marketing and Distribution podcast powered by Usher You. My name is Alex Stoltz, and as well as hosting this show, I'm head of film here at Usher You and run a company called Future of Film. Usher You is the smarter way to promote your films and catalogue with our automation, analytics, and audience building tools, all designed to make your marketing and distribution easier, more cost-effective and impactful. To find out more about what we do and access all our other podcasts, sessions, and free resources, just head over to usheru.com today, and I will spell that. That is USHERU. That's usheru.com, or just drop me a line at alex@usheru.com. So, as regular listeners know, this is a show where it's my job to speak with leading executives about all aspects of the business of getting films, getting content to audiences, and to share these insights with you. In a rapidly changing entertainment landscape, what are the new audience development, distribution, marketing strategies that are proving most effective? And what are the time-tested techniques that are still working? So it's my pleasure today to welcome to the show Sarah Timlick. Sarah heads up sales, she's head of sales, director of distribution and development for Elevation Pictures, one of the largest independent distributors in Canada. She has been in the industry now for over 10 years, having begun her career at Alliance Films after completing a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the University of Toronto. Elevation has been behind diverse titles releases such as Room, Moonlight, The Imitation Game, and Paw Patrol the movie, which is a change of tone, but it shows the diversity of the slate. And Sarah also serves as the Canadian Association of Film Distributors and Exporters, as well as being representative on the OFA Board of Directors, and having the distinction of being the youngest executive to be elected as the chair of the OFA Board of Directors. And if that wasn't enough, Sarah was just announced as one of the top women in global distribution by Celluloid Junkies. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this conversation and to learning more about Elevation, learning more about your role there. I mean, let's dive in. Tell me about what you do at Elevation, because I'm really intrigued the fact you work across distribution and development.
Yeah, so I'm the head of distribution development for Elevation Pictures. So my role entitles managing theatrical sales, so making sure that as soon as we get through the acquisition phase, that I secure screens and then secure the best box office we can in Canada and a really good market share with our US and international partners. I also oversee all the in-theater marketing and exhibitor relations, from all the trailer placement, trailer creation, and that's kind of where I started my career, and then I kind of went into sales, but that's the major forefront of my role.
Yeah. And so you're based in Toronto, right?
Yes. Right downtown, the sixth, if you will.
Yeah. And so you distribute exclusively in Canada, because I know a lot of the time, you have distributors based out of the states, perhaps, distributing or sub-distributing in Canada, but you are exclusively focused on that territory.
Correct. So Canada is our focus. We have tipped our toe in distributing some Canadian content actually in the US, but that's sort of a new venture for us. And it's kind of interesting because usually we're partnered with a US company and then we're distributing their content for them in Canada because of the heritage laws in Canada that exist. But it's very interesting when you try to do the reverse because Canada's a population of 38 million Canadians. It's really small. We're only about 10% of the US overall. So it's kind of interesting to kind of go into the States.
Yeah, absolutely. But you have that local knowledge, obviously, that expertise in terms of, the marketing and the audiences in Canada. Do you find, like, when you take on a title, sometimes will you like reposition it at all for the Canadian market? Do you change the campaign? How does that tend to work?
Absolutely, because Canada, although we're kind of the little brother to the US, very much still Commonwealth country. And so in my experience, even going way back to the Alliance Films days, a lot of times we will go with like the UK campaign and use the UK artwork because we find that it translates better to Canadians. And it's really interesting if you look at even just British content releases in Canada specifically. We had Spencer last year, and it really over-indexed in Canada as a whole. Our market share was above 11% every week over week. We had the same thing. We saw the same thing in the King's Speech. So a lot of times we kind of look at what does the international marketing look like, and does that suit our objectives better?
Interesting. Really interesting.
And also to add to that too, if you have Canadians are really proud of their own. So if you have a Canadian actor in the film, showcasing them and that they're from Canada is another thing that we tried to do. I remember years ago at Alliance, we had a film called Place Beyond the Pines, and Ryan Gosling was in the film, and we strategically placed Ryan Gosling's face all over bus shelters, all over Toronto, where he's from, the GTA, all over London, Ontario, and the grosses went through the roof. And it was an ensemble cast, so it was a really interesting tactic that we took, but it worked.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't complain too much about seeing Ryan Gosling.
No, I don't think so.
Everywhere. That's
brighten their day.
Yeah, for sure. So I mentioned a few of the titles that you've released, and it's a very diverse range. Is there a particular movie that Elevation sort of centers in on, or how do you choose those titles?
Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to like the incarnation of our company. Laurie May and Noah Siegel started Elevation as they were former Alliance and E1 and Laurie Maple executives. And the goal was to do a slate that had 30 films of elevated content, playing with the game, playing with our name.
Yeah, I like it.
And so we started, and we continue to be a hub and vessel, which showcases international films and brings sort of Academy Award films to Canadian audiences. But also we work closely with Canadian filmmakers, cultivating them and supporting them to bring unique, interesting, inclusive, diverse stories to audiences as well. So that was our forefront focus when we started out. It continues to be our focus, but then as we grew and started to expand, we also started to release wider scale films. So we probably have about 10 plus wide releases every year. We've released everything, as you mentioned, to Paw Patrol, which is also CanCon Canadian content, which we're very proud of with our partner Spin Master in Toronto. Hustlers, which is a great success for us with J-Lo, The Imitation Game, Deepwater Horizon, Hacksaw Ridge, just to name a few. So we kind of dip our toe into two buckets right now, where we're releasing wide releases that are going to wide mainstream audiences that kind of go for that escapism commercial effect, and then also keeping a focus and lens on the art house market and independent film.
Yeah. And has that, I mean, obviously everything has changed in the last couple of years, but...
Oh yeah, what happened?
Well, where do we start? Yeah. So, I mean, how's that impacting that strategy? How are you finding it?
It's been an interesting experiment. So obviously the pandemic for everyone kind of shook things up. There was a lot of, in my personal opinion, antiquated practices that kind of were elephants in the room that needed to be addressed. For example,
I'm interested to hear what they are. Okay.
Everyone talks about the windows. And that was, it was, I think, 77 days from theatrical release to EST, and then 90 days to package. But some theatrical films, as you know, they don't perform and they don't stay in theaters for those 3 months. And so there could be a benefit of accelerating your EST and VOD window and taking advantage of your theatrical marketing spend still being kind of in the zeitgeist of Canada, and then kind of redirecting it towards the ancillary. But what we found was when we got to the pandemic, Canada specifically was shut down. We were under a lot of lockdowns. Toronto had one of the longest lockdowns in the world. So theaters were closed. Obviously, people's attention pivoted to SVOD windows to stream. We also kind of pivoted that direction as well, focusing on our transactional and SVOD business. But we also kept busy at the same time, focusing on, okay, well, what kind of production stories could we come out of this pandemic and tell? And how can we utilize this time to get those productions all set up? So when we're allowed to go back onto set and to film, we can come out of this pandemic with Canadian content to serve our audiences. So that's something that we focused on. As it pertains to the windows, they're kind of complementary to one another. We've noticed that theatrical performance is almost the same in terms of how it performs on VOD and SVOD. So it's really interesting how the success is almost very similar. And what I noticed recently, like Canada coming out of the pandemic, you could kind of see people were a little bit slower to come back at first. Capacity restrictions were hovering around 50% plus, social distancing of 6 feet in between. So really your auditoriums were maybe 30% full for a while, on and off during 2021 when we were kind of doing that stop and start back into the theater. Obviously, that impacts the box office overall, with the utilization being so low because of restrictions. But as things got opened back up with masks being removed, 100%, we've noticed a huge return to the theaters. It was almost kind of the reverse psychology. People didn't want to be in their homes anymore. They wanted to go to the cinema and see films on the large screen where they were made to be seen. The audience that has struggled the most, a lot of people have talked about in many, many panels, this obviously the older demographic. We noticed the same trends in Canada, that they were slower to come out, but it was very promising this year. And what really excites me is that Top Gun Maverick, we saw them come out in buckets. They did an incredible job in Canada, huge market share percentage. And the same thing happened recently with Ticket to Paradise, the Julia Roberts and George Clooney film, $6.6 million in Canada. And when it hit the VOD transactional window, people were still going to the theater to see it. So we're starting to notice that things are kind of getting back to normal for us, which is really great. Canada overall, we do in 2019, it was about 9% market share of North America. And we're sitting at 9.4% market share for the year right now in 2022, which is really great to see. So, and Avatar hasn't even come out yet. So, which will be this week coming.
Yeah.
Very, very promising. And it's an exciting time because for myself personally, you know, I was an athlete my whole entire life. I played rep soccer, field hockey, you name it. Field hockey at a high level for the province of Ontario and for the University of Toronto. And one of my coaches always said to me, you have to be a student of the game. So no matter how long you've been playing and how much experience you have on the pitch, you've really got to continue to be curious and continue to learn because things evolve. And I think that's really served myself and the team at Elevation, which is incredible, very well, is that we've been really studying the data, watching geographically how things are happening in Canada, studying each marketplace. You know, a lot of people moved out of the city to the suburbs. So a lot of the art house market has kind of translated to smaller markets where it might not have been as prevalent before in terms of box office. So it's a really exciting time to do that and to play with the windows and see what happens and see how we can really maximize grosses and make sure that these stories are reaching Canadians across Canada.
You're listening to the Movie Marketing and Distribution podcast powered by Usher You. How is your marketing strategy right now? Are there areas you want to improve? Or perhaps you are looking for some fresh inspiration and ideas on how to remain ahead of the curve? Well, the Usher You Marketing Scorecard is a completely free resource to identify your marketing strengths and opportunities in less than 5 minutes. Head over to scorecard.usheryou.com and you'll receive a personalized report on your marketing, what's working well areas of improvement, and quick wins to boost your 2022 planning. So that's scorecard.usheryou.com. Score your marketing today with UsherYou at scorecard.usheryou.com. And now back to the show. So when you're reaching audiences in the theatres, what marketing tools are you finding most useful? What channels? How you and you said about getting people out of the house is the main kind of it's always been challenging, but it feels like it's harder now. How are you managing to communicate that?
I find it's really interesting because a couple, like even 5-10 years ago, you would really focus on network television. Like Friends is at 8:00 on Thursdays or whatever it was, and you'd be buying ads on it, or How I Met Your Mother. And now, other than live sports or maybe like season finale of The Voice or some eventized show like that, it's really scaled back. Audiences are, because of the pandemic, there's so much choice where they're kind of spending more of their time on SVOD services and watching streaming content. And because we can't buy ads on there, we've kind of had to pivot and spend more attention on social. Mm-hmm. And so how do we get people socially engaged on Instagram, on TikTok, all of these platforms. And we work with a great company, Dentsu, who kind of manages a lot of our spend. And it's just interesting how over the course of maybe 10 years, things have completely changed to digital and online, and people are attached to their phones now, right? So you kind of have to hit them that way.
Yeah. And are you driving people to the to buy a ticket at the theatre, or do you do your own sort of websites?
Yeah, so we drive people to our largest exhibitor in Canada is Cineplex Entertainment. Mm-hmm. So we drive them to the Cineplex site. We also drive them to the Landmark site. If we're open a local independent, like the Tip Bell Lightbox downtown Toronto, or anywhere outside, we try to do our targeted marketing there. But we also kind of work closely with exhibition to find out from them. They have the scene program, so they have a lot of data in terms of who their blasts are going out to, what kind of repeat clients they have who are going to see films of the same genre that might be interested in the film that you might be releasing. So we try to utilize that data and analytics to draw them in. And I think the biggest thing that we've noticed is the studio content. Obviously, they offer escapism, lots of action, the Marvel stories. We kind of try to play in the space that we offer some action and escapism perhaps from our films, but we're offering a very unique individual story that you might not get in some of the bigger blockbuster content. A great example of that is Everything Everywhere at Once. We released in the spring. When we saw this movie last December, we thought to ourselves, we've never seen anything like this before from the Daniels. It was wild, and the narratives of the daughter coming out to her grandfather and the conflict with her mother. There was just so many beautiful layers that really authentically spoke the human story, and I think audiences really connected with that. And so we're finding a streamline of followers who want to see something edgy and different that they can connect to as well. We had the same experience recently with Triangle of Sadness, in which we're 20% market share in Canada. It was a huge success for us. That film has obviously won the Palme d'Or in Cannes this past year. So anything that kind of wins an international award, we also find has a pretty good result in Canada for us. But people were really drawn to that just because it was so different with the Lord of the Flies kind of narrative. Spoiler alert, flipping of the staff after the cruise line goes down. There's a lot of social commentary on films for films that we've released like that. Films that are kind of struggling right now, and I noticed that are having a tougher time is the marketing for the art house, very serious biopic content like Tar and Till. Even Fablemans is kind of struggling in Canada. and it was kind of a surprise. And there's a plethora of that being released currently this past fall in the last couple of weeks, but it's been a challenge to get those audience specifically in. And I think perhaps the theory behind it is that they're taken from headlines that we are consumed with in our daily lives, and nobody maybe perhaps wants to go to the theaters because moviegoers are fickle. It feels like a bit like medicine instead of an escapism. So you have to have escapism. You can draw from the headlines, but you have to have something that takes people out of it and doesn't make it feel like they're being inundated with news stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got those two movies you mentioned as, such great hooks as well. So, original takes on a particular perspective. So maybe that's it as well, right? It's having something which is really, this is different, and is something to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Do you talking about things? Do you have a publicity sort of drive as well for the releases? Is that, or does that happen more in social now, or is that also happening in
it's
in the press?
Social, and then our PR team works very closely and very hard with all the Canadian press to make sure that we're in all the major outlets. They're very good, our team, at getting the cover of magazines. Our biggest festival every September is obviously the Toronto International Film Festival. And it's kind of the kickoff, if you will, to the Academy Award race. And TIFF prides themselves on having chosen the best picture many times. And so obviously for us, we've won multiple times with Moonlight and Imitation Game and Room. Moonlight, I think we lost to La La Land that year. Apologies. Which is ironic because it was the reverse.
It was the other way around, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, that's why. It feels like we should have won. Yeah. So there's a large, and we also work very closely with talent. We love to bring people up to Canada and do premieres here, have them do all the major outlets, talks. We're very excited. We're releasing Whale on December 21st across Canada. So with Brendan Fraser, and Brendan Fraser is also Canadian. So that's a very exciting thing to support as well. And we're hopeful for those grosses.
Amazing. Sarah, so tell me, let's sort of taking a different tack now, sort of away from the day-to-day of releases. Tell us about how you got into the industry, and obviously you studied fine arts at college, but was the movie industry always something you were aspiring to break into?
I always had a passion for film. And when I was in high school, two of my teachers, my history teacher and my gym teacher, are married. Nice. And they're a few years older. They're not that much older than I am. And their best friend went to McGill University in Canada, and he was a director, and he was nominated for an Academy Award for a film called Hardwood. And it really made me think, like, this is possible. Like, somebody from Burlington, Ontario, like myself, could go and work in this beautiful, fascinating, like very speedy, ever-evolving industry that constantly is speaking to what's going on in the world. It really enticed me. And so I went to UT, I studied fine art history and visual studies. And I actually was an artist and painted. My medium was paint with acrylics and sketching. And I wanted to use that to become an art director or production designer. And so I studied drafting. I was really preparing for that. I did some internships with the Canadian Stage Company, working in the theater for a while. And then I was in my third year of university. I got an internship at Alliance Films, which at the time was the largest Canadian independent distributor. They managed New Line content. They managed the Weinstein Company, Relativity, Focus Features, Lionsgate. It was a very exciting time to be there. And so I worked there in the exhibitor relations department, and my job was to do all the trailers and all the posters. So I had to make sure that all the marketing materials got delivered, all the trailers got up on time, that we were making sure that everything was like pristine for the experience in the theater setting. And then I finished my last year of university, and after I graduated, I went back to Alliance, and they hired me on as a coordinator within the department. It's a very cutthroat industry, so I had to work very, very hard. Had to dig deep many times. And then from there, we bought Maple, Lori May's company. She came over, and then we were shortly thereafter bought by Entertainment One. And then Entertainment One hired me on to manage exhibit relations. So I went on to manage that in theater marketing department, always reporting into sales. And then a lot of people abdicated from Entertainment One and were thinking that they wanted to offer more competition in the marketplace for Canadian independent distributors. So Lori May and Noah Seco, who are brilliant, decided to, with the aid of Teddy Schwartzman, who oversees Black Bear, create Elevation. And a bunch of us went to work for them. And that was January 2015. And now I run theatrical sales. So it's pretty amazing. And Elevation, much like A24, we're a small knit group. We're probably 20 plus people. And it's a really exciting place because everyone kind of gets their feet wet in different departments. When I started at Elevation, not only did I do exhibit relations and theatrical sales, but I was also doing a bit of work in VOD, transactional, and licensing. So you really get a good understanding of how the cog works and how production and acquisitions start off, and then theatrical kicks in and all the windows, and you kind of see a film through the system in the pipeline. And I don't think there's any better grounds for training than that exposure. In addition to that, being at Alliance, because of all the partnerships, and we were working with so many different mini majors, so many different studios, it really gave you experience working with so many people stateside. And now a lot of those individuals have gone on to great success at different companies, and I still work with them, but they're at different places. So it's interesting because those relationships have still stayed intact, and it's very, very rewarding. And it's nothing's more exciting than, for example, when we produce our own film, like French Exit or The Nest, and then it starts to get great reviews and take off, and then people start to recognize that it's a Canadian film and kind of get behind it and take pride. So it's been a real whirlwind, and our new kind of frontier for Elevation, and Noah's done an exceptional job as this, is really not only acquiring films at markets like Berlin and Cannes and AFM, but also producing our own content on our soil, doing co-productions with Ireland, potentially with Italy and other countries, to really showcase what Canada has to offer.
Exciting. I love it. And having that continuity or like joined upness within the company. So, that's, I think sometimes with larger distributors, sometimes that's lost, it goes from theatrical to home end and there's a disconnect. So that sounds like it's very, it's very connected and a really a great home for films. What's the biggest challenge, Sarah, in your work at the moment? In the work in the industry, what would you, if you had a magic wand, what would you wave to get rid of that headache?
Headache. I was like, how long do you have?
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's I think the biggest headache is just trying to figure out what's going to work and how to get a film to maximize its growth right now. Because it's every time, no matter how much planning and research and analytical work you do with comps, building comp titles and looking at each individual market across the country, it's still a bit of a rolling the dice when you release it into the ether of theatrical. So I think right now my focus is how can we, using the data, kind of predetermine and make the best plan possible for each film? Because it's sometimes, we've released a piece of content and it's just not hit. And you're like, why? It's such a good film. We spent the money. Why are they not coming out? I think that's, and I don't think that's a novel thing. I think that's something that always has been part of the game, right? So I think for me, that's probably the greatest challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it's just so hard now to get people's attention, and it's always been hard, isn't it?
It
To
is, right?
this feels even harder now. Everyone is, there's so many messages people are getting every day. So
Absolutely. And it was interesting. We were having a conversation with Gary Faber, who runs a wonderful company out of New York called ERM. Gary tests all of our Canadian content for us in Canada ahead before we release the film so that we can make edits or any changes, both to the film itself and to the marketing campaign. And we were having this conversation about how the advent and the pandemic of consuming so much streaming content, now the conversation, it used to be, did you go see this film? You saw the entire film. And then we had a conversation about all the different plot points and what your personal opinions were, etc. Now it's like, oh, did you finish that piece of content? How far into the show are you? Or how far into the movie are you? And it became really makes you realize how people's attention spans are so distracted. And so, because we were talking specifically about things like White Lotus. Oh no, don't tell me. Did you watch the season finale? Like, those types of conversations. But it used to be you consumed everything and there was less. And now there is so much more. There's so much choice that sometimes I think people are overwhelmed.
It's an ocean, isn't it? Ocean of content. And the problem is a lot of it's really good. So it's not like,
and then you feel like this pressure to get it, to get it done.
I was watching, this is just an aside, I was watching the Michael Bay movie, Ambulance, over the weekend. It's really good. But I was thinking back, and this is me being, older, remembering the days, the 90s and stuff. If that movie was released in the 90s, I mean, whatever, it's a long time ago, but it would have become like a real cultural talking point. It would have been something that people would have, it would have just had that moment. But it's just, it's just another movie, So but I think like the movies, the films you just talked about, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, Triangle of Sadness, they have emerged, haven't they, and become that thing that people can focus.
I think they're speaking to a lot to our postmodern, I guess it's postmodern, as my professor would have said at university, society, in terms of people are looking for something different. They're looking to be surprised. And I think that there's been very little surprises in a lot of the formulaic, not to knock them because they're great films, but a lot of the studio content can be very formulaic. And so you kind of can guess the plot points of what things are coming. And something like Everything Everywhere All at Once is you have no clue where it's going, right? Or where it's going to take you. And I think that surprise is an escapism itself. And I think that's a different type of escapism that audiences are really craving right now. But you're completely right. In the 90s, that Michael Bay, all those explosions, that would have killed.
Yeah. And it's about storytelling, isn't it? It's about taking audiences on a journey. And what is your, what do you, is that the thing which you love most about your job? You mentioned getting stories and storytellers out to audiences a couple of times in this chat. I feel that seems a motivation for you.
It is delivering stories that speak to Canadians, BIPOC stories of our Indigenous past. We released a wonderful film called Indian Horse, which we produced, which in the Canadian curriculum replaced To Kill a Mockingbird in schools and speaks to the residential schools in Canada and all that awful travesty that happened in our history's past. And it was very timely when we released that film. And it's one of the most successful Canadian films that we've ever theatrically released. I did very, very well for group sales with schools as well. And I think that's a very important thing because you're making the youth of tomorrow aware of the history of Canada and stories, and hopefully, directing them in a more guided way to be more aware and more conscientious of things that go on in our world. And in our country. So that's something it's really, really, I'm really passionate about. One thing for me that gives me such great joy is I was saying how just a moment ago, how at Alliance, you worked with people stateside or internationally or within Canada that were in different points of their career or different studios or what have you. And that, like, the years that have built up, it's almost like a fine wine of the relationship just growing, and they become friends. And when you go to CinemaCon or they come to TIFF, or you go down to visit LA or New York, there's just this like authentic human connection that you just sit with them and connect as two people having similar experiences, working in this wild industry that's a lot of fun and a lot of haste, and it's just a whirlwind all wrapped into one. And there's something so beautiful about those moments. I remember when I first started at Elevation, I went to CinemaCon and I was quite young, and I was walking into a meeting and I'm like, what am I going to talk about? Like, how am I going to, what am I going to talk about? And I'm a bit of a sporty spice, a bit nerdy about, I watch TSN every morning. Like, I watch hockey, obviously Canadian A, all the time. I watch the NFL, all these things. So when I went into the meeting, they made some comment like, did you see the game last night? And I was like, oh yeah, of course. And then we just started riffing on sports. And then, you find out what teams they're affiliated with. And it comes down to now you have chains, like text chains now that are in existence, or visits at the time where you chirp each other and your teams are playing each other. The Kings are playing the Leafs in Toronto, or the Seahawks are playing San Francisco or something like that. So it's fun, like that banter and stuff. That's what it's all about too for me, is because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, did you enjoy the ride? And I definitely have.
So thanks again for joining this episode of the Movie Marketing and Distribution podcast presented by UsherU. At UsherU, we are passionate about data, innovation, and movie marketing. And we have now combined all of these passions and knowledge into a product that is built to, essentially transform film marketing. The UsherU Total Movie Hub is created to empower distributors and film bodies to build their own audience data and run outstanding campaigns that are both more cost-effective and impactful. To find out more about how UsherU can transform your campaigns and your marketing, just head over to usheru.com. You'll also find there more episodes of this show and an extensive selection of sessions and resources on distribution, audience strategy, and film marketing. And if you'd like to book a demo or have any questions, please just drop me a line at alex@usheru.com. I would be delighted to help and love to hear from you. So that's usheru.com, and I will spell that. That's USHERU, usheru.com. Do check it out, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the Movie Marketing and Distribution podcast very soon.